Hello, welcome to another Scratch tutorial. In this video I'm going to be walking you through how to make a Battleship game. It will start, you'll position your ships, and then you will attempt to find the enemy's ships. The enemy will also attack you, and we'll have an AI that will attempt to sink nearby ships. And the game will finish once one player's ships have all been sunk. To follow along, click the link in the description. It will take you to all of the assets. The first sprite is the player's ships. Its costumes are all the different ship varieties. Feel free to customize them and make them yours. The next sprite is the enemy ships with all the same costumes. The next sprite is the torpedoes. This will be a HUD element that displays how many turns the player has left. The next sprite will be the impacts with just the main sprite, a hit marker, and a miss marker. After that we have the game over sprite. This will have two costumes with a win condition and a lose condition. For the backdrop we have a title screen, we have a positioning screen, and then we have two different screens for the game, depending on whose turn it is. Before we get started, let's hide all the sprites that we don't need right now. So I'm just going to click each sprite and click the hide button. Now let's go to the backdrop and start coding. So I'm going to do when green flag is clicked, switch to backdrop title. Then let's wait for an input from the player. So I'm going to do wait until not key space is pressed, then just duplicate that, wait until key space is pressed, then once more wait until not key space is pressed. This will allow it to not zoom through the menu. Then let's broadcast, new message, position ships. Then let's get the receiver for that broadcast and have that turn us to the positioning backdrop. So if we hit the green flag, press space, it will load this screen. Let's get into coding the player's ship generation. Click on the player's ship and show it. When the project first starts, we don't want the boat to show. So let's hide when green flag is clicked. Let's grab a when I receive position ships block. And let's make a block, name it create clone. And click this run screen without refresh. Let's drag in an instance of that. Let's first show. We're gonna want one of each ship, so let's do switch to costume destroyer, create clone of myself, switch to costume submarine, create clone of myself, switch to costume cruiser, create clone of myself, switch to costume battleship, create clone of myself, and finally the aircraft carrier. Let's just hide when that is done. So now when we hit the green flag, press space, it has created all of the ships for us. Now we want these ships to first of all be randomly placed and second aligned to the grid. So let's make another block, name it position ship. Run screen without refresh. So let's do when I start as clone. Position ship. We want our ships to be positioned from here to here horizontally and from here to here vertically. So let's get a pick random and just do X position 20 to 200. Then duplicate that and do 40 to -120. Now if we hit the green flag, press space. Our ships are randomly being placed. But we have a problem. They're not aligned to the grid. So what we have to do is divide this number by the grid size, which is 20, and then round that. Once we times it by 20, it will be aligned to the grid. So let's do that for the Y too. Divide by 20, round, and then multiply by 20. Now if we go, as you can see, they are now aligning to the grid. But there's still some problems. First of all, they're supposed to stay in the grid, but some of them are going slightly outside of it, like here. So let's do a repeat until not, and then touching color, which is this color. And also, if we hit the green flag, sometimes ships overlap one another. So let's do an and, duplicate the not touching color, and just do the color of the ship. And then let's just duplicate this go to random area block and just put it inside the repeating loop. So now if we hit the green flag, as you can see, they are randomly positioning themselves within the grid. Right now they're only vertical though. So let's do an if else block. If pick random 1 to 2 is equal to 1, let's point in direction 0, else we'll just point in direction 90. Let's put that inside the loop, hit the green flag. As you can see, the generation is now working. Now let's get into coding being able to configure your ships. So when I start as clone, let's do a forever loop. Let's sense if the current boat is touching the mouse pointer and mouse is down. Mouse is down just means they're clicking and holding. We're gonna wanna repeat this code until the mouse is not down. Let's make a block, reposition ship. We're gonna add a number input, X, another number input, Y, then finally a number input, direction. Run screen without refresh. Let's drag out an instance and input the current X position, Y position, and direction. Now we're just gonna wanna go to the mouse, so let's do go to mouse X and mouse Y. Let's test it out. If we hit space and we hover over a ship, click it, we can drag it around. We stop clicking it, stops being dragged around. Now, right now it's not being snapped to the grid, so let's fix that. Let's just divide mouse X by 20, round it, and then multiply it by 20. Let's duplicate, just switch out the mouse X for a mouse Y. Now if we hit the green flag, we can now drag our ships and they snap to the grid. But we have a problem. We can drag ships out of the player's grid and we can also overlap ships, which we don't want. So let's make an if condition, drag an or statement. If touching the blue outside of the player's area or touching the other ship's color, then we are going to go to X and Y. So now if we hit the green flag, we cannot drag it out and we cannot overlap two ships. Really good. But we can drag the ships to the other grid because this shade of blue is slightly darker than this shade of blue. So let's get another or statement and add X position is less than 0 and just combine the two. As you can see, we cannot go over there, ships cannot collide, and we cannot leave the grid. Perfect. Now let's code the boats rotating. If the letter R is pressed, let's check if the player's current direction is equal to 0. If it is, let's just point in direction 90, and if it isn't, let's point in direction 0. So now if we start and press R, we can see it rotates, but it's rotating too quickly. So let's add a wait until not R key is pressed. That way it doesn't flicker. But now we have a problem. If we press R near a ship, the ships will overlap. So we want to have the same logic up here with the repositioning as with the redirection. Let's duplicate and just take this condition. Put it before the wait until not R key is pressed. And let's put point in direction and drag the direction input we have for this block. That way if it rotates and it's touching another ship, it will go back to the direction it was before. Let's try it out. As you can see, we can rotate, but it won't ever let us rotate if that means we will be colliding with another ship. Great job if you've made it this far. Let's now get into setting up the AI ships. Click on the enemy ships, and let's do a when green flag is clicked, hide. Instead of recoding the whole generation, we can actually steal from this first sprite. So we're gonna need to create clones. So let's take this, drag it over the enemy ship sprite. We're going to have to create clones. So let's drag this one. We're gonna have to reposition the ships. So let's drag this one. We're gonna have to reposition the ships once the clones are created, but we're not going to have to be able to move them. So just take this off, just get this bit, reconnect it, and we don't have to worry about this. Now just separate the blocks. So we're going to be generating the enemy ships on this side. So let's change the horizontal input to -20 and -200 instead of +20 and +200. The vertical placement will be the same, so we don't need to change that. Also make sure to do it on this block too. We're gonna want to change these custom blocks. So let's make a block, create enemy ships, run screen without refresh, and switch it out for the create clone block. Let's get rid of this too and create enemy ships. Get rid of this too. Let's make a block, position enemy ships, run screen without refresh, and let's replace it with the regular position ship. Get rid of this, and then let's just position the enemy ships. So now if we test it, as you can see, the enemy ships spawn. We don't want them to be seen though. So let's set ghost effect to 100. The reason we do ghost effect instead of hide is because hide won't detect collisions and we still want to be able to interact with these clones. Also, since they won't be showing, this not touching ship color won't work. So let's get rid of that. Let's go to the player's ship and get a touching enemy ships. Let's drag it into the enemy ships and get rid of that one. Let's drag it in here and there we go. Now if we hit the green flag, as you can see, they're hidden and all set up. Great job if you've made it this far. Let's go back to the backdrop. It says press space once you're ready. So let's get a wait until key space is pressed, and then let's broadcast a new message, begin game. Let's get a when I receive begin game, and let's just switch to the player's game. We can still drag our ships around, which we don't want to be able to happen. So let's go to the player ship and do when I receive begin game. Let's stop other scripts in this sprite. So now if we go, we can still reposition in the configure screen, but once we start the game, we cannot reposition the ships. Let's go back to the backdrop and broadcast a new message named player's turn, because we want it to be the player's turn first when the game starts. Now let's go into the impacts. Let's do when I receive player's turn. Let's make a new variable. Name it torpedoes for all sprites, and let's set that to 4. When the project first starts, we don't want any impacts showing, so let's hide. But when the game begins, let's show, but set ghost effect to 100. Let's get a when I receive block, new message, and do AI turn. And let's do broadcast player's turn. And for the player's turn, let's do broadcast AI turn, and it will just loop. When the green flag is clicked, we're gonna want to switch to this main sprite. So let's do when green flag is clicked, switch to main sprite. So we can tell whether the object that just received a broadcast is a clone or not. Let's also do an if statement and do if costume number is equal to 1. And drag that around, duplicate it, and drag it around. So because the player has 4 torpedoes, we're going to want to repeat 4. Let's make a new block and name it shoot torpedo player, and don't run screen without refresh. Let's drag an instance, put it in here. So we're going to want to wait until the player's cursor is within the bounds of the enemy's grid. So let's do repeat until, and let's get an and statement. Let's repeat until mouse X is less than -10. This vertical axis right here, and mouse X is greater than -210, which is this vertical axis. Let's duplicate it, change out the mouse X's for mouse Y's, and do if mouse Y is less than 69 and greater than -129. Let's combine these two together with an and statement, and we're gonna wait until the player's mouse is down, which means they're selecting where they want to attack. Let's put that in. Also, let's snap to the grid with this algorithm. Let's create a clone of myself. Let's change torpedoes by -1, and then let's wait until the mouse is not down. So when the clone is created, let's check if the marker is touching the enemy ships or the player's ships. If it is, let's switch to costume hit, and if it isn't, let's switch to costume miss. Let's also clear graphic effects and go to front. So now if we test it out, we can click in the enemy's grid and use up one of our guesses. And if we hit one of their boats, it shows. Now, we want to make sure the player cannot go in the same place twice. So let's go to the player's ship. Let's get a sensing block and get touching impacts. And drag it to the impact sprite. Get rid of this one. Put it in a knot and do an and statement. And just take this condition and put it inside. Let's make some variables for the player's health and the enemy's health. Let's make a variable for all sprites, players' ships, and then let's make another for enemies' ships. Let's do an if-else statement and do if touching enemies' ships. Then let's change enemies' ships by 1. Else change player ships by -1. Now let's go over to the game over sprite. Set enemy ships to 0 and set player ships to 0. For this sprite we also want to go to 0, 0 and hide. Let's do a when I receive message. Do loss. Let's switch to costume you lose. Show and go to front. Let's duplicate that. Do a new message. Victory and switch to costume you won. There are 17 tiles for each player, so let's do 17. Now let's code the torpedoes. When the green flag is clicked, let's set torpedoes to 4. Let's switch to that costume, and then finally hide. Then let's do when I receive begin game. Let's go to 0, -5. Let's show, and then forever, let's switch to costume, torpedoes +1. So now if we begin, as you can see, the indicator is now here, and each time we press, it goes down. Now let's code the AI guessing. Let's repeat 4 and make a block, shoot, torpedo AI, and don't run screen without refresh. Let's add an instance. Each time the AI will guess, so the AI won't do all of its guesses instantly. Each time it guesses, let's wait, pick random, 0.4 to 1.2 seconds. Let's make a block for the guess, make AI guess, and run screen without refresh. Let's put this in here above the broadcast player's turn and wait once it is done. So to make the AI guess, we're just going to have it select a random tile from the player's grid. We can just get this script from our generation script. Let's make an AI guess and let's make sure the AI isn't double guessing the same spot or that the AI isn't guessing out of the bounds of the player's grid. So let's do if. Let's get the touching impacts block from this condition, or if it's touching the color of the background, then we'll just repeat until it's not, and just get an and, 2 knots, duplicate, and put it in the condition. And then let's just do make AI guess, and then create clone of myself. So now if we start, and we use up all of our guesses, the AI will make its own guesses. We want the game to stop. We don't want the AI to continue once the game has finished. So let's do when I receive loss, stop, other scripts in the sprite, and then stop all. Duplicate it and do when I receive victory. I accidentally added one more not condition than we needed. So just make sure it's this condition. The AI is working great, but it's just doing random tiles. We want it to do random tiles until it makes a hit, and then we want it to try the surrounding tiles, just like a human plays, because a human will randomly guess, but once they get a hit, they know that it has to be nearby. So let's make a list and name it tiles with potential for all sprites. And then when the green flag is clicked, let's delete all of it. Now let's go when the impacts are cloned. Let's do if costume is equal to 2, and what that means is if my current tile is a hit, let's also make sure that it's if X position is greater than 0. That way it's not one of the player's guesses that are a hit. Let's add the surrounding tiles to tiles with potential. Make sure to do X position, Y position, X position, Y position in an alternating pattern. The first one is the block to the right, the second one is the block to the left, the third one is the block directly above, and the fourth one is the block below. We don't need to do the diagonals because boats can't go diagonal. Now what we can do is go to where the AI randomly guesses a tile and do an if-else statement. Let's check if tiles with potential has anything in it by doing if length of tiles with potential is greater than 0. And then we can go to X, item 1 of tiles with potential, and Y, item 2 of tiles with potential. Then once we go there, we can delete 1 of tiles with potential. And once we do that, item 2 would become 1, so then we can just delete 1 of tiles with potential again. So now if we try our game out and the AI gets a hit, it will add the nearby squares and try and do those squares before it makes a random guess. So if we continue, it is now being smart like a human and realizing that if you made a hit, in close proximity there's another hit. Now let's code the end. Let's go to the backdrop, do a when green flag is clicked, and a forever loop. We want to do an if statement and do if players' ships are less than 1, broadcast loss, stop other scripts in this sprite, and then stop all. Duplicate it, and then use enemy ships. And instead of broadcasting loss, broadcast victory. Finally, let's add when I receive AI turn. Let's switch to AI game. Duplicate it. When I receive player's turn, let's switch to player's game. Now our game is finished. If you click the green flag, press space to begin. You can reconfigure your ships, rotate them. You can press space to begin again. Start guessing. The AI will guess. Try and sink the AI's boats before he gets yours. And there you go, a full Battleship game in Scratch. Thank you for watching, have a great day.